When it comes to political soundbites, strong and stable is Sir last decade. In 2020, it's all about levelling up. Boris and co are determined to keep their mitts on the Northerners who lent their vote in the last election. He promised he's going to level up the regions and burst that pesky Westminster bubble once and for all. A constitutional review will be launched in the spring and, amongst other things, will explore the House of Lords relocating to York. I'm a massive fan of boosting the North, and talk of relocations gets my vote. In fact, I'd go a step further and relocate both houses, not just the second chamber. Alas, if they're serious about levelling it up, then any relocation needs to be in addition to a serious programme of reform for the House of Lords. And as for the regions, they'll also need proper devolution plans, improved investment, tax incentives, better education and enhanced transport links. Only then will the North truly reach the dizzy heights of the next level.
I'm going to say something I don't often say on this show. I'm absolutely open-minded about this, and I'm going to be persuaded by what I hear from my fellow pledge panellists, because the argument for is absolutely obvious, not least that the government is only in power because it's borrowed the votes of so many people, so it has to be seen to facilitate that. I don't know about the House of Commons, but the House of Lords, I think possibly is a very good idea, save for the fact that, and this is why I would argue against the House of Commons, the very fact that the House of Commons is in London is because it is the capital city, which also attracts all the financial institutions and most of the relevant bodies, Scotland Yard, MOD, counter-terror, whatever it might be. In moments of great crisis, I think certainly for the Commons, it makes sense that the Commissioner of the Met can be there like that, as can the Governor of the Bank of England or whatever it might be. So that is why I think a capital city has to do that. So I'd always argue against Commons. As for the Lords, I think it's probably, but I want to listen to everyone else, probably a good idea. And I rather like the fact that his Lord or his Ladyship will have to get on a train to claim their hundreds of pounds of allowances and goodness knows what else, and some of the best pensioner care you can get in the world by sitting there and being paid for the privilege. They'll actually have to get on a train to go to York. So I'm even-handed, but I'm probably tilting towards you. Yeah,
I think this is a great idea. I think, you know, a lot of these peers that are very keen to turn up in the Brexit debates, you know, are very happy to remain in the EU and remain in London. Let's get them out of London. Let's get them up north. And I know that it is symbolic, but a lot of politics is symbolic. And we have this massive problem in this country, is that we have a capital city. We don't really have a second city, no offence to Birmingham, but it's not like Madrid and Barcelona or New York and Chicago. We don't have a second city as such, and we need to do things that start to facilitate that. And, you know, at the moment we're also talking about cancelling HS2. Now, it's imperfect, and apologies to anyone who lives in Aylesbury as well, but it's what comes in its place. You know, in this, you look at the M62 corridor, all those big cities up there in the north, you know, if you want to go in this country up and down, you're fine. If you want to go across, then immediately it's a problem. And yeah, there is a part of me, Nick, that quite likes the idea of seeing how they get their per diems if they have to get on the train up to York.
I think it's 300 quid, isn't it, a day?
It is.
Yeah, probably the train fare as well, to be honest, 300 quid a day.
We should become Lords. We can put a date.
I thought you were on your way.
We could do that, couldn't we? What do you think, Afua?
I think it's a bit of a gimmick. I mean, I think that the real issue, which I completely agree with, is that we don't have a second city, that we're not properly investing in the north of England. I take that seriously. Like, we need something that replaces the industry that used to make towns in the north thrive. And we've never had a serious long-term political consensus around how to build up those cities back into economic powerhouses.
The Northern Powerhouse, Afua.
But listen to people from the north about the Northern Powerhouse. They're scathing about it, absolutely scathing. And I think that...
It just sounds like a wrestler, doesn't it? It's never been a particularly serious
That's a whole other debate, but I have not had good feedback from people I speak to in northern towns about Northern Power. So I think if we're serious about that, then this kind of sounds quite superficial in comparison. I mean, yes, politics is symbolic, so yeah, maybe it does send a good message, but what I see happening is that we relocate the House of Lords north, we promptly kind of forget about it, and it becomes, every time someone says, well, we're not doing anything from north, they say, well, we put the House of Lords there. And it doesn't really
York is really nice as well.
Yes,
York is beautiful, yeah.
Oh, that's all right then.
I think proximity matters. I think that actually when you are close to something, it becomes harder not to do something about the problem. Though I think the problem would be it then becomes somewhat unfair if the House of Lords is just moved to another city. What about the other cities? And I think a model that would be much more interesting is something similar to what happened with the BBC and also what's happening with Channel 4, which is you have regional hubs. And actually, why do we need another House of Lords in one place? Why don't we split it up a bit? And then they come to London once a month or whatever to gather.
But the challenge with that will be, you've seen the EU Parliament, didn't you? And, you know, they relocate Brussels, Strasbourg, and that gets absolutely hammered in terms of the cost implications of relocating
No, but there
around.
are ways to make it work.
But June,
and then I think you have models that you can copy.
You've got 5 enormous palaces or debating halls or chambers.
Who is saying that that's what it needs to be? That's not what it needs to be
Do
at all.
you want to know what people think about this?
Yes.
A YouGov poll asked, should
yes.
the House of Lords be based in York? 23% said it should. 36% said it should not, and 41% basically...
So that the majority don't care. The majority couldn't give a flying fig.
I don't think this is
The
number
majority
one on
probably
people's ideas.
see it like moving an old person into a granny flat. It's almost like getting a problem out of the way. But I mean, that is...
granny flats. Can I bring in Lord Dubs, and he talks about the Brazil and Australian model.
Other countries have moved power away from what is their main city and made the capital elsewhere, like in Australia, Canberra and so on, in Brazil. You know, we could manage that. But I think the important thing is to keep Parliament together as one entity, both houses of Parliament. We might have an elected House of Lords, I wouldn't mind that, but at least let's move Parliament as a whole thing. But the main thing is to give power to people in the north. Having Parliament sitting in one place doesn't mean the power is going to be there. And I think the mayors of our northern cities should have more power, more say in how they run their part of the country.
Can I ask you something? And I'm sorry, this is such a clumsy... As you obviously, and you're quite rightly, you're proud of your northern roots. Do you think they care? Do you think people in the north would think, marvellous, Lord McTavish is going to be coming to York next month. I'm so happy.
When you look at the Brexit vote, and I think that lots of the contributing factors in the Brexit vote, there are so many people that feel disenfranchised, that feel hardest hit by austerity, that feel that there's not opportunities in their area. So what I would say is it's less about shoving the Lords wherever. It's more about, as I said in the thing, it's got to be alongside a programme of particularly devolution, because why should any central hub, say in Westminster, dictate, say,
like
regional...
a separate Yorkshire?
Well, one Yorkshire, there's big campaigns for one Yorkshire, for example,
right,
to devolve power.
But not a separate government for each...
No, not a
because you
separate
remember
government.
John Prescott's idea of a Northern Assembly or something died on the vine. It was a ball.
No, but ultimately, what do a group of officials in Westminster know about, I don't know, educational priorities, say, in Hull, or local infrastructure
That's why we need a good MP for Hull, telling them.
Well,
Whatever
they had
happened
their
to that?
chance, Nick. They had their chance. More fool you, Hull, that's what I say, I do.
But, Michelle, you mentioned the Brexit vote as well, and, you know, this is another thing that makes me excited about the post-Brexit era. We wouldn't have been discussing this if the referendum hadn't happened. It would have been kind of sort of centrist politics
Quite right,
as
too.
usual.
Yes,
This should have
right.
been, this should have been Labour's home
Jeff.
territory, this. Labour's heartlands, the North. I never heard it. I never heard it during the Blair years, and I think that it is part of this exciting redrawing of the political map.
I'm sceptical
But I
about that
think if
link,
the Tories
personally.
play their cards right over the next 5 years, I think they could keep hold of a lot of these northern places, because we all talk about lending the vote once. I do think if they play the cards right, they could keep them ongoing, and Labour would struggle to get some of those seats back.
And you touched on reform. I made a note. So you talk a little bit about... So you see regional assemblies as part of that reform as well, because you don't just see the House of Lords as the be-all and end-all, do you?
No, but I would reform the House of Lords. I mean, I think it's the
Slim it
world's...
right down, right?
Well, it's the world's second biggest second chamber, second
Right.
only after China. I think there's about 800 of these people sitting there getting their 300 quid. You've still got, in some cases, hereditary peers,
Yes.
which I just think is an absolute joke and wrong. So I think there's so much you could actually do to slim it down and make it more effective before you just start picking it up and shoving it in a
Could we
different
make it like a Love
location.
Island? Could we make it like a Love Island and you
on
have to
the
vote
picket-
for it?
on the-
Lord's Island.